Hey guys, tonight we're unspooling a candlelit scroll hidden in the back of a medieval cupboard, a manuscript that could make even the stoniest abbot clear his throat. Picture yourself right now in a drafty stone chamber. Outside, rain sizzles against the shutters. Your only company is the slow drip of wax and the rustle of pages yellowed by centuries of secrets. But don't get too comfortable, because the world you're about to enter is more dangerous than any dark forest or crumbling castle. If you get caught reading what's in your lap tonight, you probably won't survive this, at least not with your reputation or your eyebrows intact. So, before we drift any deeper, if this hushed little corner brings you even a flicker of calm, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right in your chest. Where in the world are you right now? Let me know your city and local time in the comments, so I can imagine you as a fellow midnight conspirator poring over forbidden pages with me. Now breathe slow. Let the weight fall off your shoulders and sink with me into tonight's slow unraveling of the past, right here on Historian's Diary. You start by touching the ragged edge of parchment, heart drumming as if you're about to confess a sin instead of just reading one. Medieval sex manuals, yes, they really existed, weren't all velvet cushions and perfumed letters. They were, in a sense, the era's ultimate forbidden fruit. Imagine a time when knowing too much could mean your ruin, and even basic questions like what's supposed to happen on your wedding night were whispered only behind bolted doors or scrawled in code between the lines of other, safer texts. You squint at looping script, illuminated by a stub of tallow candle. The Latin is crabbed and the margins stained. This isn't some ancient 50 Shades. There's no one in black leather, no silk blindfolds. Instead, the first thing that hits you is the earnestness, page after page of warnings, superstitions, and sometimes absurdly practical tips. The writers, some clerics, some lay healers, a few anonymous scribblers with more courage than sense, weren't aiming for titillation. They were obsessed with control, how to manage bodies, urges, and above all, reputations. You stumble onto advice that seems at once comical and perilous. Don't eat too many onions, or your humours will run wild. Wear amulets against excessive desire. Make sure your bed linens are blessed by a priest. Good luck explaining that request at the next laundry day. All around you sense the nervousness, the same tremor that probably shook the hand of the young woman or man who last cracked open this book by candlelight. Medieval sex was a public secret. Everyone knew it happened, but nobody was supposed to talk about it. Why did people reach for these manuals? Not because they were trying to spice up the relationship. Let's be honest, they'd never even heard of scented massage oil. They sought out these texts because sex was a problem to be solved. A dangerous river to cross. Get it wrong, and you risked everything. Your soul, your health, your children's fates. And if rumor was unkind, your place in the village market forever. The reasons for the secrecy were as thick as the smoke in a winter hall. Church doctrine warned that even married passion was a slippery slope. Medical tracts insisted that too much or too little could warp your body or break your mind. The law threatened public shaming, fines, or worse for unnatural acts. Don't worry, we'll get to the details soon enough. And beyond all that, there was just old-fashioned embarrassment. The manuals themselves are full of code words, puns, and tiptoeing around the point. You realize, reading by that guttering candle, that you're not just deciphering ancient ink, you're untangling centuries of shame and secrecy, stitched together with a wink and a prayer. You turn a page and find a helpful illustration. A pair of lovers, both fully dressed, lying on what looks like a sawmill plank. A little arrow points helpfully from his foot to her elbow. The caption is barely legible. Only in this manner is it lawful, and only after the third hour of darkness. If you're waiting for a diagram worthy of modern textbooks, you'll be disappointed. Medieval artists seemed terrified of drawing anything too real. One can only imagine the laughter or the horror if the local priest ever flipped to this page. Still, the manuals served their purpose. For some, they were a shield against ignorance, an emergency manual in a world that mostly said, "Don't ask." For others, they were a charm, a way to guard a marriage, ensure a child, or simply ease an anxious mind before a wedding night. And for a precious few, perhaps people much like you, hunched over by moonlight, they were a brief escape from a world that pretended, loudly and often, that nobody had ever wanted anything more than a good night's sleep and a bowl of pottage. You catch yourself smiling at the sheer nerve it took to write some of these lines, much less to read them. Here you are, centuries later, reading the confessions of a world where privacy was almost impossible, but curiosity was relentless. It's easy to laugh at their fear of onions, or the notion that dangerous dreams could be warded off by a particular psalm. But as you keep reading, you sense something universal, a fragile hope that with the right words or rituals, love and desire might be less terrifying. So you settle in deeper, the candle burning low. Already you sense the presence of those who came before you, hearts pounding, eyes wide, daring to ask questions they weren't supposed to voice. You're not alone in this room. History is whispering, page by secret page. Tomorrow the world will pretend not to know, but tonight, you and I are conspirators, and the first confession is this. In the medieval dark, everyone wanted to know a little more, and nobody really wanted to ask the wrong person. You move deeper into the labyrinth, letting the last echo of candlelight slip behind you. There is an unexpected hush here, the thick woolen silence of cloistered halls where voices must flatten and bodies seem to vanish behind stone and shadow. It's not the noise of the street or the anxious breath of a bridal chamber, but the steady, quiet discipline of those who dedicate their lives to the page and the pen. Monastic libraries, those peculiar sanctuaries, are where you find the next layer of these ancient instructions. The air smells of ink, beeswax, and faintly the sourness of old vellum. You pad quietly across the flagged floor, watching as a robed scribe leans close over a stack of bound folios. Here, books are sacred, but the body is considered a mystery best left only partly illuminated. Manuals on all things corporeal are locked away, sometimes under literal lock and key, sometimes behind layers of allegory and euphemism that would trip up even the cleverest reader. You pause at a narrow desk, running your fingers over the worn leather cover of a text. A slip of parchment marks a passage near the middle. The Latin is spare, the handwriting deliberate, almost severe. The words within are not meant for easy reading. You sense a tension in each line, a careful weighing of what should be shared and what must remain unsaid. In the cloister, knowledge is a kind of stewardship, a trust with consequences. Monks and nuns are not meant to indulge, but they are tasked with guarding wisdom, and that means knowing exactly where the boundaries lie. You picture the scribe, hunched over the same passage on a night much like this one. He writes by lamplight, pausing often, dipping his quill, glancing at the door. There are rules in this place, rules stronger than oak beams or iron locks. To catalogue flesh and spirit in the same breath is to risk confusion, a blurring that could upset the delicate balance these walls are built to protect. Some entries are dry, little more than lists, the proper order of the body's parts, instructions for prayer before and after rest, admonitions against touching the skin with too much curiosity or delight. Yet beneath these warnings, you catch the edge of something else, a curiosity that cannot be fully suppressed. The words bend at times toward a secret wish to understand, not just the soul but the body, how it feels, how it moves, how it can bring both comfort and peril. You imagine a young novice, barely old enough to read, stumbling upon a line that lingers at the boundary. The passage is couched in metaphor, a garden that must not be entered too freely, a river that must not be crossed alone. The rules are strict, but the metaphors are many. You see the careful instructions for washing, the warnings about dreams that linger after waking, the reminders that even a fleeting thought can become a weight on the spirit. You follow these lines with growing attentiveness. The language is clipped, yet a certain gentleness seeps through. There is caution here, but not cruelty. The compilers of these texts know what it is to be curious, to want to understand something that everyone says must remain hidden, so they leave small hints, folded into prayers, tucked between lines of admonition, a reference to the warmth of hands, a note on the importance of kindness, even when the rules seem unyielding. You linger, reading the same sentence over and over. It does not say everything outright, but the meaning is clear to those who need it. Some words are only meant to be read once, by candlelight, in the hush of the library when the rest of the world is sleeping. There is a comfort in knowing that others have wondered the same things, even when the answers are buried deep. You close the book and let your fingers rest on the cover. The silence of the cloister wraps around you. You feel the presence of those who copied these words, who preserved them so carefully for the next reader. Their caution is palpable, their restraint a form of care. The world outside might be filled with noise and uncertainty, but in this quiet library, each secret is kept safe. Each question is allowed to linger a little longer. The air seems to thicken as you push your chair back. You leave the library knowing that the rules here are strong, but not absolute. In the cloister, knowledge is guarded, bodies are boundaries, and every whispered instruction is a delicate negotiation between desire and discipline. You slip back into the cool hallway, the hush of the library still pressing on your skin like the memory of a gentle touch that was never meant to linger. You step lightly, every movement careful, as though the shadows themselves might carry your secrets from wall to wall. The narrow window slits let in no more than a sliver of pale light. You become one more silent figure, passing through centuries of silence. The doors to the scriptorium stand closed, yet you can almost sense the weight of unspoken things behind them. On the other side, pens move quietly across parchment, copying, correcting, never straying from the prescribed line. The labor is slow. Each word is a deliberate act, a balance between duty and temptation. You picture the faces bent over their work, eyes fixed but thoughts wandering just far enough to touch a question they're not supposed to ask. You turn a corner and catch sight of a plain wooden box, marked only with a simple sign. It holds scrolls that are not meant for ordinary eyes, their titles unassuming, their contents edged with risk. You reach for one and unroll it slowly, fingers trembling as the script unspools across your lap. The words do not offer instructions for pleasure or promise of secret satisfaction. Instead, they trace boundaries, how to fold yourself into ritual, how to keep the mind steady when the body falters. There is an emphasis on routine, what should be eaten, how to arrange the room before sleep, when to speak and when to fall silent. In these instructions, everything turns inward. There is little mention of love, almost none of longing. What matters most is order, preserving the peace that cloister walls are meant to provide. You notice how the lines circle back on themselves, each admonition a mirror to the next. There is a comfort in repetition, as if the words themselves could build a rampart strong enough to keep desire outside. You move your lips soundlessly, reading and rereading a passage that traces the edge of a secret. It mentions dreams not with suspicion but with caution, as if they might be storms one must weather in silence. If a dream unsettles you, there are steps to follow, a certain prayer, a gesture before dawn, a particular arrangement of hands beneath the linen. The advice is practical, but also a gentle reassurance. The text does not blame you for your thoughts. It merely asks you to keep them in check, to make space for calm where chaos might otherwise take root. You let your eyes wander to the window again, watching the morning begin to stir at the far edge of the world. Within these walls, time is measured not by desire or longing, but by the slow arc of sunlight across stone. Each hour is a chance to begin again, to master the self just a little more. In the dormitory, soft footsteps pass overhead. Someone coughs, and the sound is quickly swallowed by silence. There is a sense of community here, but it is a fellowship built on restraint. Each person careful not to cross the lines that hold everything together. You imagine how many others have sat just where you are now, eyes wide in the darkness, wondering at the same words, feeling the same uneasy peace. You roll the scroll back up and place it carefully in the box. The lid closes with a quiet click, a soft promise that what you have learned will not be spoken aloud. The rules and rituals, the careful instructions and gentle warnings, all of it settles in your mind, heavy and silent as stone. There is no one to ask, no easy way to say what you have found, but the feeling of discovery is its own reward. You move back down the corridor, the hush of the cloisters wrapping you once again in their careful embrace. The world here is governed by discipline, and every rule is a thread in the fabric that holds it all together. Yet within the weave, you sense something softer, an understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the questions that linger long after the candles are snuffed. The day is beginning outside, but inside, you remain suspended in that pocket of time, caught between what is written and what is left unsaid. You carry the weight of those words with you, quiet and secret, as you slip back through the door and into the waking world. You step out of the stone hush and into the shifting realm of older stories, where nothing is written in neat lines and every lesson comes dressed in superstition. The air is thick with the warmth of packed earth and the soft scratch of straw underfoot. There is no library here, no strict scribe, just the muddled wisdom of many generations, all braided together and passed from hand to hand. The sun sets behind the thatched rooftops, and the voices of the village rise, soft, steady, full of the things people say when they think no one important is listening. You pause, ear turned to the drifting smoke from an evening fire. In these hours, the stories unspool themselves almost by accident, woven into chores and quiet gossip. You hear a mother warning her daughter not to walk barefoot in the dew, for it's said that cold, damp earth will sap the body's strength and make a bride weak on her wedding night. Somewhere nearby, a widow shares an old rhyme with a younger woman, tracing her finger along a faded birthmark and whispering that certain marks mean a child will always carry longing in their bones. There is a warning in every saying, and a lesson in every warning, none of them written, all of them remembered. You turn over a smooth pebble, feeling its coolness settle in your palm. Even the earth, it seems, holds secrets. Beneath the surface of these ordinary moments, the advice runs deep: what to eat before a big day, what herbs to tuck under a mattress, how to avoid the gaze of a jealous neighbor. The difference between medicine and magic is so thin it hardly matters. A sprig of rue might be tied at the wrist to steady the heart, a handful of fennel seeds scattered by a windowsill to keep night thoughts at bay. Some people do these things for comfort, others because it is simply what has always been done. You find yourself repeating the motions almost without thinking, as though your own hands remember what your mind cannot name. Night settles and you move through a tangle of voices in the dark. An old man with a crooked back sits by the road, murmuring about moon cycles and the way certain days are best for planting, others for sowing, and still others for conceiving. Children laugh, echoing the phrases without knowing their meaning, spinning stories about babies delivered by storks or left in the cabbage patch, tales as old as confusion itself. It is all tangled together: science, magic, advice, warning, and hope, each impossible to separate from the rest. You drift closer to the warmth of a cottage, drawn by the low thrum of voices inside. Here the talk turns practical, but never straightforward. Questions are asked sideways, answered with a shrug or a gesture, the conversation looping in on itself like a path through thick woods. A woman tells her sister about the power of honey and milk before bed. A grandfather insists that salt at the threshold will keep away both illness and envy. These aren't rules, exactly, but 1,000 tiny gestures of care and fear, meant to smooth the way for bodies not yet understood. You notice how no one ever says exactly what they mean. There are warnings about what happens if a young man sleeps with his feet toward the door, or a young woman brushes her hair under the wrong moon. There are soft mutterings about dreams that leave a person flushed and trembling by morning, and the careful way those dreams are explained away with a cup of cold water or a special blessing murmured under the breath. All around you, the landscape feels mapped out in invisible lines, paths that must be followed, rituals that must be observed. If things are to go as they should, there are ways to sleep, ways to wake, and ways to carry yourself through the world that promise a measure of safety against what lies waiting in the dark. Not every warning is a threat. Some are only small comforts, a way to keep order where there is so much that cannot be known. You watch as a young bride is given a tiny silver spoon wrapped in red thread, a charm to keep her strong for the first night in her new home. The women who give it to her never say why, but their eyes are bright with understanding. Somewhere nearby, a group of boys tosses stones and trade impossible stories about what happens between husband and wife. After the feasting ends, the adults pretend not to hear, but their silence says as much as any old proverb. As the night deepens, the talk grows quieter, closer to the heart. Someone asks about the best time to plant beans, but everyone knows she is really asking about something else. The answer is always the same: watch the moon, listen to your body, trust what your mother told you. No one claims to know everything, but everyone trusts in the weight of memory, the long shadow of tradition. You sense how fragile these instructions are, how easily they could vanish if no one bothers to speak them aloud, how much courage it takes to ask and to remember. The old stories carry more than warnings. They carry hope too, and the belief that the body, mysterious as it is, can be guided by a careful hand or a whispered word. You rest quietly, feeling the slow comfort of belonging to a chain of memory that stretches beyond the walls of any single room. At the end of the night, as the embers die down and the village quiets, you feel the stories settle into your bones. Not all wisdom is written. Sometimes it is only the sound of a voice in the dark, the press of a hand on your shoulder, the gentle reminder that you are not alone in your wandering. The world outside may keep its secrets, but here in the shelter of old words and older hopes, you find your place for a little while longer. You drift away from the murmur of stories and into the narrow space where night has almost settled and quiet anticipation thickens the air. Somewhere, a bed is being made, rough linen stretched tight, dried lavender pressed beneath the pillow, a small dish of water set beside the low frame, as if to catch whatever shadows might be swept away before morning. You pause in the doorway, invisible and unnoticed, watching as careful hands smooth creases from the blanket. The smallest gestures seem weighted with meaning. There is an unspoken choreography here. Someone stirs the last coals of the hearth, another dims the light to a gentle glow. In this room, every motion signals a preparation, but no one dares say what is truly coming. You see a woman kneel to whisper a prayer at the foot of the bed, her lips moving with practiced certities, her eyes closed to the flickering flame. A man enters quietly, sets down a folded shirt at the edge of the mattress, and glances away, uncertain whether he should look or simply wait. Silence lingers, full of hope and the shyness of bodies not yet known. The weight of expectation presses down, and you can almost hear it rustling in the linen, echoing between breaths. It is not a world of easy laughter or careless touch, but of patient gestures and questions left unasked. You watch how each person carries the uncertainty, how they tuck it beneath ritual and habit, and how in the carefulness, something tender flickers to life. You notice the tiny details, a ribbon unfastened with trembling fingers, a ring placed in a wooden dish, a single candle set burning low on the windowsill. The light flickers over faces turned away, over hands that hesitate before moving closer. The room holds its breath. The night seems endless, stretched thin between what is known and what is hoped for. You wonder if anyone, anywhere, has ever truly felt ready. The rituals unfold slowly, each step deliberate. There is no script, only the steady repetition of motions inherited from those who came before. Someone pours water into a basin and washes their hands, letting the coolness steady their nerves. Someone else draws the curtains, leaving only the softest outline of lamplight on the wall. The sheets are turned back, as if inviting courage to slip quietly beneath them. There are no words, just a kind of quiet encouragement, a hope that if everything is done in the right order, nothing will go wrong. You see that fear and longing twist together here, neither strong enough to overwhelm the other. The lessons learned from overheard whispers and half-remembered advice become a gentle guide. You sense how each person tries to remember what they were told about patience, about kindness, about how to touch softly and speak more softly still. No one is certain of themselves. but everyone is determined not to let that show. The moon climbs higher, and with it, the hesitations fade just a little. There is a shared breath, a reaching out, a pause that stretches so thin it almost breaks. Then the first touch, a hand against a wrist, the slow drawing closer of bodies still wrapped in awkwardness. The candle flares, then dims, and the shadows on the wall lengthen and twist. You feel the flutter of hearts, the racing hope that this night might be the one where everything is finally understood. You watch how they move, sometimes graceful, sometimes fumbling. There is an honesty in the way nerves betray them, an elbow caught in a sleeve, a tangle of limbs beneath the covers. It is not a scene of practiced seduction, but of earnest trying, of two people wanting to get it right and fearing they will not. The ritual matters as much as the act itself. The care with which each step is followed is its own kind of offering. You notice the small sounds, a stifled laugh, a breath held too long, the quiet words that pass between them, more reassurance than instruction. The room is filled with the scent of crushed lavender, the rough comfort of worn linen, the persistent hope that everything will unfold as it should. There are no manuals here, only the memory of what has been passed down and the willingness to try and try again until the unknown becomes just a little less frightening. You sense how fragile the night is, how easily it could tip into embarrassment or sorrow, but beneath the careful rituals and hesitant touches, there is a stubborn hopefulness. Each person is willing to believe that, by following the old advice, by moving gently and listening well, they will discover something true and lasting. The ordinary details become sacred, the way a hand smooths the sheet, the way a head bows in silent gratitude, the way a body curls into another when the candle gutters and the world is reduced to darkness and breath. When at last sleep comes, it is not with certainty but with the quiet satisfaction of having tried. The night has unfolded in its own strange rhythm, not as anyone expected but as it always has, full of stumbles, of awkwardness, of small, fierce hopes. The rituals have carried them this far, and in the end, that is enough. You watch the final ember fade, the room slip into shadow, and you know that what has happened here will be remembered, not for its perfection, but for its honesty. As you turn away, the silence follows, gentle and forgiving. The old advice has been honored, the unknown faced with as much courage as anyone can summon. And in the hush that settles after, you realize, every night, in every room, the story begins again. Always half remembered, always full of longing, always new. You follow the thread of nighttime rituals out into the spaces where talk is quieter still, where the most delicate warnings and prohibitions linger between the lines of old songs and the margins of familiar stories. This is a place shaped by things that are not spoken directly. You feel the hush deepen around you as you move past sleeping doorways and unshuttered windows, every surface painted with shadows and the scent of distant rain. The first hints of what must not be done drift in the form of half-finished sentences and watchful glances. You catch the flicker of an older woman's eyes as she tells her granddaughter not to linger by the water alone after dusk. You listen as a brother warns his younger sibling about the dangers of wandering too far past the hedgerow, his words trailing off, unfinished, as if even the mention of certain acts could bring a kind of trouble no one is willing to name. You sense the way fear is stitched into everyday habits, a veil drawn over mirrors at night, a cup overturned on the table before sleep, a prayer murmured with a hand pressed flat over the heart. In every corner, the forbidden curls close around the ordinary. There is a heaviness to these secrets, a sense that some things are better left untouched. You find the warnings written into the very grain of the woodwork, the edges of well-thumbed pages, the patterns on woven blankets folded neatly at the end of a marriage bed. They are always there, marking out lines that must not be crossed. You catch yourself drawn to the edges of conversations, listening for the one thing that is never quite said. A friend of the family comes to visit, sits at the fire, and tells a story about a neighbor's misfortune, a marriage that soured, a house that fell silent. There is no mention of what happened, only the careful circling around a cause that everyone understands. The listeners nod in unison, sharing an unspoken knowledge as deep as the soil beneath the floorboards. A warning is given, but never direct. You learn to read the tilt of a chin, the shiver in a voice, the sudden quiet that falls when certain subjects drift too close. At night, alone with the pages of a secret text or the echo of an old song, you see how these taboos are shaped, not only by fear but by care, a kind of vigilance that means to protect as much as to limit. The list of what must not be done is endless and shifting. Don't look too long, don't ask too directly, don't stray from the path drawn by those who came before. You notice how even in private, people hesitate before their own questions, half afraid that naming a thing might summon it to life. You watch as a young couple walks the edge of a field in the half-light, their hands barely touching. Their conversation is light but full of gentle evasions, an intricate dance of implication and denial. One asks about a rumor heard at the mill, the other shakes their head and changes the subject. In that tiny pause, you sense everything that has been left out, all the rules that govern not just what is done, but what can be imagined. There are reminders everywhere, sometimes as plain as a cross above a door, sometimes as subtle as a change in the weather. You catch the sharp scent of burnt rosemary rising from a kitchen. You see the careful way someone traces a pattern on the threshold before stepping inside at night. The warnings have no single shape. Some come as curses, others as blessings, all designed to mark a boundary that is both visible and invisible, shifting with the moment and the mood of the world outside. You feel the gravity of the forbidden, how it binds families together and pulls them apart. There is a certain weight to every rule, but also a comfort, the sense that by obeying, you are held safe from dangers too large or too vague to name. The world inside the walls is drawn tight, protected by rituals that are both barrier and bridge. You realize that the power of a warning is not in its precision, but in its ability to linger, to make the air heavy with what cannot be asked. As the hours slip by, you watch these prohibitions settle into routine. You see how even the smallest act can carry the memory of a warning. The way someone sets the table, the direction of a bed, the closing of a book with two fingers pressed tight over the spine. Each habit is a thread woven through time, a reminder that every choice, every glance, every word carries consequences that ripple outward long after the moment has passed. The night stretches on, quiet but not empty. In the half-light, you sense the presence of all those who kept these boundaries before you. Their caution fills the rooms, making each silence deeper, each gesture more meaningful. You feel the pull of what is not allowed, and you understand, perhaps for the first time, that these unspoken rules are not just meant to keep you in check, they are also meant to keep you whole. In the last moments before dawn, as the world outside the window turns from black to grey, you watch the final warning flicker in the fading candlelight. It is not shouted or written in bold letters, but whispered in the soft closing of a door, the gentle touch of a hand on your shoulder, the quiet resolve to keep some secrets safe, even from yourself. You wait for the morning to lift the heaviness from the room, but the shadows linger long after sunrise, as if drawn to the old anxieties that never quite dissolve. The day itself is quiet, but beneath the chores and slow routines, you sense the restless pulse of fear, a kind that winds itself into every conversation, however ordinary. There is talk of too much heat in the blood, of moods that come and go with the weather, of appetites that must be kept in check, lest they turn the body wild. You notice how every warning about desire is also a lesson in limits. No one ever says the word out loud, but the boundaries are set early and often. You hear it in the way a mother hands a bowl of soup to her daughter, insisting on bitter herbs that cool the blood. You see it when a father tells his son to avoid certain fruits in the summer, because some sweetness is said to bring on restless dreams. The smallest comforts are rationed, measured carefully so that nothing tips too far toward longing. In the corners of the kitchen, remedies sit in quiet order. There is a jar of vinegar on the shelf, a bundle of dried sage hanging in the window, a stack of cold stones wrapped in cloth for laying on a fevered brow. Each remedy is spoken of in half sentences, its purpose obvious to all but rarely named outright. Sometimes the cure is for a body that aches, sometimes for a mind that won't let go of troubling thoughts, and sometimes it is for the flicker of want that nobody admits to feeling. You see the patterns in daily life, the careful ways that excess is shunned, bread is eaten without honey, water is drawn cold and clear, laughter is quieted before it grows too loud. There are no open celebrations of desire, only subtle reminders that the line between pleasure and danger is impossibly thin. You watch as people move through the hours, their gestures small and contained, their faces calm but always watchful. There is a gentleness in these cautions, but also a weight. You notice how the old fears become habits, how a person turns away from the mirror in the morning, how hands are washed twice after certain dreams, how the windows are shuttered on nights when the wind is warm and heavy. No one says what they are guarding against, but the urgency is there in every routine. You wonder how many generations have kept these same rituals, each one hoping to keep their household safe from the unnamed trouble that lives just outside the threshold. The stories drift on the air soft as the dust motes in a sunbeam. Someone tells of a neighbor who grew ill after too many restless nights, another of a cousin whose laughter faded after a wild summer. The lesson is always clear. Too much feeling is a risk, and too little is a warning of something missing or broken inside. There is a quiet fear of both extremes, a hope that by staying somewhere in the middle, one might avoid the sharpest edges of longing and loss. You step outside and feel the wind lift your hair, carrying the scent of cut grass and damp earth. Even here, surrounded by ordinary beauty, you notice how every pleasure is tempered. A handful of berries, eaten too quickly, is met with a frown. The sudden dance beneath the trees is ended before the music carries you away. The world is full of gentle warnings, reminders that the body's delights can turn sour if not watched closely. You pause by a stream and watch the water move over smooth stones. Someone nearby murmurs about the danger of drinking too deeply, about the way water remembers every touch and carries it downstream. There is an understanding in these words, a sense that even the simplest acts must be measured, their consequences weighed against the hope for calm and safety. As the afternoon drifts on, you return to the house and see again the signs of care, the herbs on the windowsill, the water bowl by the bed, the quiet hum of a lullaby meant to soothe more than just restless children. The old cures are everywhere, quiet and constant, shaping the day as much as the weather or the work that needs doing. You watch as someone lays a cool cloth across their brow, closes their eyes, and waits for peace to settle in. Evening comes, and the light grows soft and golden. You hear the slow breathing of someone asleep in the next room, their dreams guarded by the scent of sage and the rhythm of careful breath. You lie awake for a while, listening to the stillness, feeling the weight of all the cautions and comforts that have brought you here. The night outside is deep and patient, and you find yourself wondering if the old fears will ever truly fade. In the end, you know they will remain, as much a part of life as the turning of the seasons or the taste of bread on a cold morning. The remedies and warnings blend together, a gentle shield against the wildness that waits just beyond the edge of reason. You let the hush settle around you, grateful for the quiet discipline of a world that has learned to live with its own longing. You settle into the slow hush of evening, where the walls of every house feel close and the weight of quiet expectations grows thicker than the shadows. It is in these hours that rules are remembered most sharply, rules that hold not just the body but the soul to account. The presence of the confessor, the priest, or the silent watcher of the household becomes unmistakable. Even if no one speaks their name aloud, you sense it in the stillness, the way every movement seems careful, rehearsed, as if any stray step might leave a mark not just on the world but on something unseen. The rooms are full of reminders, linen folded with precise corners, the small basin set out for washing before bed, the old book placed face down as a silent boundary. In every act you feel the invisible presence of guidance and judgment, a memory of those who, even now, are expected to listen, to ask, to forgive, or to punish. There is a feeling that someone is always watching, or could be if you let your guard slip. Conversations in these moments are softer, trailing into pauses that say as much as the words themselves. The confessional is never far away, even if the church doors are closed for the night. You see the way people gather their thoughts, rehearsing stories and explanations, choosing what to share and what to keep hidden. The rules are not just in the open, they have made a home in every thought and gesture. You notice how people are taught to carry secrets with dignity, to let questions and memories settle at the bottom of the heart, undisturbed. Some advice is spoken quietly. Don't dwell on what you can't forget. Say the right prayers, and all will be well. The comfort is gentle but heavy. It soothes and warns in the same breath. You sense that much of what is left unsaid becomes a kind of second soul, a quiet companion kept close in case it is ever needed. On certain nights, the presence of the confessor becomes real. A visit announced at dusk, a slow walk through the garden before entering the house. The sound of the latch lifting and footsteps on the wooden floor. You observe the careful arrangements. A stool pulled up by the fire, a pitcher of water poured, the hush that falls as the first question is asked. The words come haltingly, the stories fragmented, full of omissions and polite lies. What is given is never the whole truth, but what is kept back is a shield, a piece of the self held safe from judgment. You watch as the listener nods, murmuring old phrases of forgiveness or warning. The ritual is as practiced as any other, shaped by repetition and caution. The confessor's voice is steady, calm, the tone shaped to carry the weight of both authority and mercy. There is no drama, no sudden release, just a slow unraveling, a careful folding away of what cannot be spoken aloud. In the pause that follows, you sense the burden shifting, lightening a little, though it never disappears. You move through these moments quietly, learning how the rules are lived. The house itself seems to absorb every word, every silence, storing them in the creak of the floorboards and the folds of the curtains. You sense how every confession, every withheld truth is woven into the pattern of daily life, shaping the rhythms of meals, sleep, and the most ordinary gestures. Some nights, the rituals of forgiveness are simple, a whispered prayer in the dark, a hand resting gently on a shoulder, a look exchanged over a half-closed door. The comfort of being heard, even imperfectly, is in. On other nights, the weight returns, heavier for having been spoken aloud, and you see the way it lingers in the tilt of a head, the silence after a question left unanswered. You follow the thread of secrets out into the street, where the quiet rules of the home echo in every shadow. The world beyond the door is not free from judgment. Instead, the expectations multiply, woven into every glance and greeting. There is a shared understanding that certain things cannot be undone, that the memory of a mistake or an indiscretion might outlast the words of forgiveness. The soul, you realize, is shaped not just by what is done, but by how carefully it is hidden, how skillfully it is lived with. As the hours drift on, you watch the slow return to calm, a bowl of water emptied onto the earth, a prayer whispered at the windowsill, a candle snuffed with steady fingers. The rituals are not meant to erase what has happened, but to contain it, to place it in a quiet corner where it cannot cause harm. You notice how the smallest gestures are repeated night after night, each one a silent promise to do better, to hold oneself apart from trouble. Before sleep comes, you feel the last secrets settle around you, cool and weightless as the air. The confessor is gone, the house is quiet again, but the rules remain. They are written nowhere and everywhere, spoken and unspoken, a tapestry of reminders that you cannot help but carry with you, even into your dreams. You move quietly into the waking world, where sunlight spills across rough floors and the first sounds of morning rise in gentle waves. A ladle stirring a pot, the scratch of a broom, the careful click of a latch lifted so as not to wake those still lost in dreams. Here in this pale new light, the wisdom that belongs to women drifts softly through the house. You notice how secrets travel on the hush of voices that never quite grow bold, and yet seem always to find their way into waiting ears. You watch as women gather near the hearth, sleeves rolled, hands busy with dough and thread, each motion practiced and deliberate. They talk in rhythms that echo the day's work, little snatches of advice tucked between instructions in mending, cleaning, baking, and tending wounds. The rules are not written but remembered, layered into songs hummed while working, woven into the ways a mother braids her daughter's hair, the way an aunt checks the knots at the hem of a skirt. No one claims to know everything, but each one adds something: a pinch of salt for luck, a word of warning for a journey, a charm for safe passage through the night. You listen as old stories are told, shaped by the gentle urgency of lives lived within careful boundaries. There are reminders to wash one's hands in cold water before bed, to keep rosemary close on restless nights, to sweep the kitchen at dusk so that love and safety are not carried away with the dust. You see how these lessons move quietly from woman to woman, never quite the same, but always familiar. Sometimes the youngest listen in silence, their eyes wide, already learning the shape of what must be kept secret. You sense, too, the worries that move just beneath the surface. You catch a glance shared over a cup, a quiet sigh, a warning to watch for the shifting mood of a husband or the way a child sleeps when the wind is from the west. No one speaks directly of what frightens them, but you feel the caution that trails after every piece of advice. Protection is never far from the center of these rituals. A sprig of rue pinned at the collar, a prayer whispered under the breath before stepping outside, a pattern drawn in flower at the threshold so that harm cannot cross. The men move in and out, pausing to ask after a lost sock or a missing spoon, but the true exchanges happen only in the small spaces between chores, when the house feels safe and the morning is still slow. You see how comfort and knowledge are given, bit by bit, until the quietest girl knows how to keep a secret, and the oldest woman can offer a cure for any ache of body or heart. You notice too the fears that men carry, fears shaped by the same silence and uncertainty. The advice is softer, disguised as jokes or gruff warnings, but it's there in the way a father fixes a broken chair or leaves a lantern burning at the window. He won't say it, but you know he is hoping to keep the household whole, to guard against whatever danger the world might bring in the next turn of the weather. The days repeat, each one shaped by small efforts to keep luck and love close at hand. You watch as bread is marked with a cross before baking, as a ribbon is tied and untied at a wrist to make certain that longing will not linger too long. There are stories for every shadow: how to turn away a nightmare, how to invite a gentle dream, how to quiet a quarrel before it grows sharp. You realize that the world of women's wisdom is as rich as any library, though its knowledge is often lost with the dusk. As the afternoon deepens, you follow a group to the well. The women move in a small cluster, sharing news and questions with every dip of the bucket. Someone asks about a fever, another murmurs a charm to bring sleep. The advice passes from hand to hand, each offering a thread to the tapestry of understanding that binds them together. You see how small comforts are given freely: a shawl for a shiver, a pinch of lavender for a restless child, a story for the girl who is nearly grown. In the hush of twilight, a supper is prepared and the house readies for another night. The lessons become softer, spoken in lullabies or lost in the hush of rocking a child to sleep. You sense the burdens, both seen and unseen, that women carry and share: a constant vigilance, a gentle hope, a willingness to believe in the power of care and caution. You see the way they shelter one another, the way they remember what has been forgotten by others, the way they pass along whatever wisdom they can, knowing that every offering is an act of protection. You leave the warmth of the hearth and step out into the gentle night. The house is quiet, the shadows long, but you carry with you the memory of voices, the weight of old secrets, the comfort of knowing that even in a world of silence and caution, there are always hands to catch you and stories to light your way. You step out into the deeper hush of evening, where windows glow faintly behind drawn curtains, and the chill carries the scent of herbs hung to dry above the hearth. The village slows, settling into the rhythms of rest, and in these hours, you see the world shaped by remedies that move in silence, gathered, mixed and trusted to guard against the aches of body and spirit. The line between care and caution is you notice how easily medicine becomes ritual, how the smallest acts are believed to carry power, and how hope lingers in every careful preparation. You watch a woman sort dried leaves by lamplight, her hands steady as she crumbles marjoram and thyme into a jar. The movements are practiced, almost meditative. She does not name her purpose, but you sense it in the hush. Some herbs to cool a restless mind, others to warm a heart grown cold. Beside her sits a cup, water turned cloudy by a steeping root, its bitterness hidden in honey. Each measure is guessed by memory, each step carried out as it was shown to her long ago. You notice how nothing is wasted. Flowers pressed between pages, seeds saved in paper folds, bark scraped and bundled, every scrap kept in case it might be needed to soothe a fever or quiet too loud longing. The jars line the shelf in neat order, their contents known by touch and scent rather than by any written mark. The recipes shift with the seasons. What is gathered in spring is different from what is sought under the long gold of autumn. There is a patience in this, a willingness to trust in cycles and in memory. You watch as remedies are given with a word or a gesture, a cup pressed into a trembling hand, a paste smoothed across the skin, a handful of petals sprinkled beneath a pillow at dusk. These acts are small but meaningful. They are not explained, only repeated, offered with a look or a brief touch on the shoulder. Sometimes there are instructions. Let it steep until midnight. Drink it before the rooster crows. Keep the jar by your bed for 7 nights and no more. The rules are flexible, guided by instinct and the long memory of what has worked before. You sense that the old cures are as much about reassurance as they are about healing. The world is uncertain, bodies often a mystery, and desire a thing to be managed, never fully understood. If a husband grows distant, a woman slips a knot of wormwood into his pillow. If sleep will not come, a boy is sent to gather poppy petals from the edge of the field, careful not to bruise them in the basket. When hope is needed, there is always some small thing to be done, a gesture or a mixture that promises change, or at least a little peace. You see how, over time, these practices become the quiet heartbeat of the household. The clink of glass, the scent of drying herbs, the simmer of a pot on the edge of the fire, all a part of the fabric of each day, so familiar that their magic goes almost unnoticed. Some mixtures are made for courage, some for calm, some to soften a sharp tongue or clear the mind after a night of troubled sleep. You notice how people accept these gifts with gratitude, whether or not they believe in their power. The act of receiving care is its own kind of comfort. There is a gentleness in the giving, but also a certainty. When a friend arrives at the door in tears, she is led to the table and handed a spoonful of something bitter and strong. No words are needed. The sharing of the remedy is enough. You watch as burdens lighten, if only for a while, and realize how deeply these rituals matter, even when their meaning is hard to put into words. You listen as the quiet advice passes between friends and family, what to do when the heart aches, when the mind cannot rest, when longing grows sharp enough to wound. The solutions are always practical, always personal, and never discussed in public. No one asks for a cure outright. The help arrives without being named. A jar left on the windowsill, a pinch of powder slipped into a cup. You notice how every problem has its answer, even if it is only the comfort of being cared for. As the night deepens, you watch the household settle, shadows folding into corners, silence thick with the promise of dreams. The jars and bundles rest on their shelves, the kitchen is swept, the beds made neat. You lie still for a moment, letting the scents of sage and lavender drift through the dark, and you understand that, here, care is given not as a solution, but as a way of walking together through uncertainty. Before sleep finds you, you hear a lullaby hummed softly, the final gesture in a long day of small kindnesses. You let the world grow quiet, comforted by the knowledge that whatever trouble waits in the heart or body, there will always be a remedy waiting in the dark, a hope brewed in secret, passed from hand to hand until the night is gentle again. You wait in the gentle darkness, listening as the house exhales and settles, each board and beam creaking quietly under the weight of sleep. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, then falls silent, and you are left with the rhythm of your own breath and the slow, steady pulse of the world turning beneath you. Outside, the sky is clear, the moon bright enough to cast a silver line along the road, and in this light you notice how every day, every hope, every uncertainty seems to hang on something as fragile as timing. You recall how, throughout the long hours of conversation and preparation, there is always talk of when. There are days that are meant for beginnings, and others that carry a warning to wait. You hear advice passed from mouth to ear, often quietly, as if to share it too loudly might break its magic. Someone says that a certain phase of the moon is best for new undertakings, another that a chill morning is unlucky for anything close to the heart. You listen, understanding that every decision is weighed, not just on desire but on the movement of stars, the turning of the earth, and the memory of what has come before. In the hush of a sleeping house, you see the tools of this old wisdom: scraps of parchment marked with circles and signs, stones stacked on the sill in careful order, dried flowers hung where the sun will touch them first in the morning. The marks and arrangements are more than decoration. They are reminders of what is hoped for and what is feared. You trace your finger along the edge of a rough calendar, notched with dark and light, and imagine all the lives that have been shaped by its rhythm. You remember the whispered instructions: wait until the moon is new, rise before dawn, let the rain wash over you on the first day of spring, light a candle at midnight and do not speak until it gutters out. These rules are never explained, only repeated, and the comfort they offer is as much in their repetition as in any promised result. There is a sense that time itself is an ally, if you can learn to read its signals, if you can trust in the cycles that govern so much of what is hidden. You watch as a couple lingers by the window, eyes fixed on the sky, hands clasped tightly together. They do not speak, but you see in their stillness all the questions that fill the night. Should we wait until the next full moon? Is tonight the right time? The answers are never clear, but the act of asking, the hope, the patience, the willingness to believe, shapes the moment more than any sign from above. You sense how, in every household, these patterns of waiting and watching are woven into daily life. The bread is baked when the wind is right, seeds are sown when the stars are high, letters are sent only after a dream that feels like an omen. The timing of everything matters, and so too does the act of pausing, of holding back desire until the world feels ready to grant it. There are disappointments, of course. Nights when the signs are right but the heart is restless. Mornings when hope dissolves with the fog. Yet you notice how even these moments are met with a kind of acceptance, as if patience is itself a form of wisdom, as if longing can be eased by the comfort of ritual. You watch as life continues, each gesture a small act of faith in the patterns that repeat, again and again beneath the surface of ordinary days. You step outside for a moment, feeling the cool night air on your skin. The village is silent, the stars wheeling overhead in their ancient courses. You realize that, even as the world changes, these old ways of listening to the sky, to the turning of the year, to the secret signals that guide every hope and fear remain. You feel the quiet assurance that, though nothing is certain, there is meaning in the waiting, solace in the cycles, and a kind of peace in the slow, silent marking of time. You return to your bed, the moonlight painting the sheets in pale blue. You close your eyes, letting the steady breath of the house lull you towards sleep. You know that tomorrow the rituals will begin again, a glance at the sky, a question asked in secret, a decision delayed for another night, and in this you find a gentle reassurance, a belief that whatever comes, you are part of a pattern older than fear, larger than hope, and as steady as the turning of the earth. You lie awake in the soft darkness, aware of the hush that falls when words run out and questions curl inward. All around you, the world moves in its steady circles, each person tending to their worries, their hopes, and their careful rituals. But as you listen to the silence, you become attuned to what has not been said, to the empty spaces in every story, to the gaps that open up between rules and remedies, where longing lives quietly, untouched by advice or tradition. You notice the weight of omission, how every warning and instruction seems built around something unnamed. There is talk of caution, of what not to do, but so little about what might be wished for. The texts and whispered lessons skirt the edges of longing, never venturing into the simple, difficult truth that desire can be gentle as well as dangerous. You understand that pleasure, for all its presence, is a shadow moving just beyond the edge of the firelight, rarely acknowledged, never described. You remember a time when you listened closely to a story, waiting for a hint of what brings happiness to the heart, and found only the same cautions. Be careful, wait, do not stray. You recall watching someone trace patterns on a table, their eyes fixed on the wood grain, while a question trembled on their lips, left unasked, because there was no space for it in the world as it had been explained. You sense the loneliness in this silence, the ache of never knowing if your secret hope is shared by anyone else. You observe the patterns of daily life and see how longing tucks itself into the smallest gestures. It lingers in the careful touch of a hand arranging fresh linen, in the quiet way someone lingers in a doorway before night falls, in the sigh that slips out when the world is finally still. These moments pass without comment, but you feel their presence, the hidden wish for connection, the dream of kindness, the hope for understanding. You think about the way people look at one another when they think no one is watching, the questions in their eyes left unanswered, the smiles that come and go without reason. You see how much remains unspoken, how much could be different if there were words to describe what is wished for, not just what is feared. You sense a gentleness in the silence, a fragile hope that maybe somewhere someone else wonders the same things. You remember a time when laughter rang out, light and unexpected, and how quickly it was hushed, as if joy itself might be a cause for worry. You notice how every blessing is offered with a reminder to be careful, how every comfort is shaped by caution. The world is full of ways to guard against harm, but so few to invite happiness. You understand, perhaps for the first time, how much is lost when only danger is named. You see the gaps in the advice, the places where there could have been talk of comfort, of gentle touch, of the ways people find solace in one another. You notice how rarely anyone speaks of trust or of the sweetness that can grow in the safety of a shared night. You imagine what might change if these things were spoken, if longing could be met not just with warning but with welcome. You watch as the house settles, the slow breathing of sleep filling each room. The quiet is deep, but not empty. You sense the presence of questions, of wishes that have never been uttered, of the hope that understanding might come with the dawn. You realize that the most powerful lessons are sometimes those that are left unwritten, the truths people find for themselves, in the silence that follows every rule. You lie still, letting the hush settle around you, and wonder what it would be like to speak aloud what is most dearly wished for. You feel the steady beat of hope beneath the caution, the gentle insistence that there is more to want than fear. The night holds you, quiet and thoughtful, and in that stillness you begin to trust that even the words left unsaid have meaning. Even the questions left unanswered can be a kind of guide. You drift through the quiet house, the last traces of night lingering in the corners, and you sense the weight of boundaries, rules made not by the household, but by the world beyond its walls. The village wakes slowly, but outside the comfort of private rooms, there are sharper edges to what is allowed and what is forbidden. You notice how carefully everyone moves in public spaces, their words measured, their gazes quick to turn away. You walk the narrow lane, feeling the press of old laws all around you, each one shaped to fit the fears and hopes of another time. There are rules about what can be worn, about what can be said, about which doors may be opened and which must stay closed. You sense the invisible lines that mark the world, lines that can be crossed by accident, but whose consequences are all too real. The cloth of a dress, the cut of a sleeve, the way a ribbon is tied. These things carry meanings that change from place to place, day to day. You watch as people keep close to these boundaries, careful not to draw notice. There are reminders everywhere, a sign painted on a wall, a bell that sounds at the wrong hour, the sudden hush that falls over a crowd when someone steps out of line. You feel how quickly the rules can tighten, how swiftly a careless act becomes a cause for worry. You see the way a word, once spoken, cannot be called back, the way a glance can be enough to set whispers moving through the streets. In the market, you see the power of boundaries made visible. Fabrics dyed only for the wealthy, foods kept behind a counter, faces carefully blank as prices are discussed. You sense the tension in each exchange, the awareness that every transaction carries its own risks, its own unwritten rules. The world beyond the door is full of watchers, some official, some only neighbors with long memories and sharp tongues. You notice how even the smallest choices are shaped by the fear of punishment or shame. A person keeps their head down, their steps measured, their voice low. There is a way to speak, a way to stand, a way to slip through a crowd without attracting attention. You see how quickly someone can become a cautionary tale, how a story is shaped and reshaped in the telling, until it serves as a lesson for everyone else. You sense too the ways people push back against these rules, a ribbon hidden beneath a cloak, a meeting arranged at the edge of the woods, a smile exchanged in secret. These small acts of defiance shimmer like sunlight on water, impossible to pin down but always present. You watch as people find ways to keep something of themselves safe, even in a world determined to measure and judge every action. There are moments when the law steps in more forcefully, a fine paid, a public warning, a punishment carried out for all to see. The town square becomes a stage, the boundaries of what is allowed marked out in stark relief. You feel the hush that falls, the way everyone turns away, the silent agreement to remember and forget in the same breath. The lesson is not only for the one who is judged, but for everyone watching, the reminder that the world is always ready to draw its lines a little tighter. As you walk back home, you see how the fear of breaking these boundaries lingers, how it shapes the way people dream, the way they hope, the way they hold themselves together. The law is everywhere and nowhere, written in books few can read, but more deeply carved into habits, stories, and silences. You sense the ache of things unspoken, the longing to step outside the lines, if only for a moment. Inside the house, the quiet returns, gentle and forgiving. The boundaries of the world are kept at bay, for a little while, by the warmth of familiar voices and the comfort of rooms where judgment cannot reach. Yet you know the lines remain, just beyond the door, ready to remind everyone of what can and cannot be done. In the hush of evening, you let the weight of these boundaries settle, feeling both their constraint and the secret strength it takes to live within them. You stay a while in that space where wishes and silences overlap, the quiet pressing in, soft and weighty. Morning finds you watching the slow rise of mist outside the window, noticing how the world moves cautiously, as if every footstep must be measured. You understand that beneath all the old advice and endless rituals, there are deeper worries, ones that are harder to voice, harder even to hold. You listen as the household stirs to life, every movement gentle and careful. There is no rush. You sense the presence of quiet anxieties, carried in glances and the set of shoulders. The questions that trouble the heart are rarely asked directly, but you recognize their shape in the pause before a task, in the way a cup is set on a table with more force than needed, in the hush that falls over the room when someone mentions a hope that has not come true. You sense the worry that something might be wrong, that a wish could remain unanswered. There is fear sometimes buried, sometimes rising up unexpectedly, that a union might never yield the comfort it promised, that a long wait will stretch out forever. You feel the weight of secrets carried in silence, a missed moon, a restless night, a question about why laughter has grown thin and rare. You see the ways people try to comfort themselves and one another, reaching for small certainties in the absence of answers. You watch a woman linger by the window, counting the days as they pass, her lips moving in silent calculation. You notice a man who rises before dawn to tend the garden, his back bent not only by work but by worry that will not ease. Each one is careful to act as if nothing is amiss, but you recognize the ways their hope and doubt move side by side. You listen to the old remedies being offered again and again, a sip of warmed wine at night, a charm stitched into a hem, a handful of wild flowers set beneath a pillow, each a gentle promise that the future might be coaxed into kindness. You see the trust placed in these gestures, even as you sense the weariness behind them, the question of what happens if hope is not rewarded. Sometimes a quiet conversation takes place behind a closed door. The words are slow, tangled, as two people try to understand the shape of their shared longing. The room is filled with patience, but also with fear that nothing will change, that a door once opened will not be opened again. You sense the way these moments stretch on, held together by silence, and by the courage it takes simply to ask, and to keep asking, even when no answer comes. You watch as advice is given, not in certainty but in comfort. "Wait a little longer," someone says. "Try this instead." The words are soft, meant to soothe, but you know that underneath, the questions remain too deep and tangled for easy fixing. You see a hand rest quietly on another's shoulder, a gesture of understanding that does not demand or explain. As the days turn, you notice the rhythm of hope and disappointment, the ways people adjust their dreams. Some find solace in new routines. Others turn inward, holding their uncertainty close. You realize how deeply the need for reassurance runs, how often people look for signs, a sudden change in weather, a forgotten flower blooming, the smallest shift in routine that might mean good news is on the way. You feel the loneliness of these private worries, the shame that sometimes shadows them. There is a kind of silent grief for what is not named, a sense of falling short that is never spoken aloud. Yet, even in this quiet, you sense the persistence of hope, the way it flickers and brightens in unexpected places. A shared smile, a gentle word, a touch given without explanation. Night falls again, gentle and forgiving. You rest in the hush, letting it wash over you, holding the truth that there is no single answer to the questions that trouble the heart. The fear of not being enough, of not being able to give or receive what is most wanted, is met again and again by the quiet courage of those who keep trying, who keep caring, who continue to believe in the promise of another morning. You wait at the edge of the day, watching as the world outside your door stirs with new energy, the market square coming alive with the calls of sellers, the tramp of feet, the soft barter of early morning. Here, the rules and warnings that drift quietly at home become something sharper, something traded and measured, and sometimes, just sometimes, offered for a price. You step into the flow of bodies, feeling the air thick with secrets that slip between baskets and coins. You notice the market stalls filled with goods both ordinary and strange. Linen, salt, bundles of herbs, scraps of parchment, all jostling for attention beneath striped awnings and makeshift tables. You pause before one small booth, its wares hidden in the folds of a heavy cloth. The scribe behind it works with slow care, his ink-stained hands turning the pages of a thin booklet, his eyes wary of passing glances. You see that there are things here that are not openly named, advice that is not written on any sign. Some customers come and go quickly, speaking in low voices, exchanging a coin for a folded slip of paper or a scrap of linen marked with symbols only a few understand. The sellers know the risks, what can be said aloud, and what must remain a transaction of silence and suggestion. You sense a shared caution, the knowledge that a word in the wrong ear could cost more than a day's earnings. You linger near the stall, listening to the language of the market, half spoken, half implied. There are those who come searching for remedies, others for comfort, still others for the answer to a question they dare not ask at home. The scribe's face is careful, his tone gentle but never familiar. Each sale is a negotiation of trust, a way of exchanging fear and hope under the guise of ordinary goods. You watch as someone trades a measure of flour for a slip of paper, barely glancing at its words before tucking it deep into a sleeve. Another asks for a charm against sorrow, her fingers trembling as she counts out oins. These small acts of commerce are heavy with meaning. each one a step toward knowledge, or at least the comfort of believing something can be done. You sense too the quiet competition among those who trade in secrets. There are other stalls, other sellers, an old woman with a box of herbs, a man with a battered book he claims to have copied by his own hand. The market is full of whispers about whose remedies work best, whose advice can be trusted, whose price is fair. The air shivers with both caution and longing. No one wants to be fooled, but everyone hungers for some small certainty in the face of the unknown. You notice that some buyers are careful, eyes darting, seeking reassurance before they make their choice. Others are bold, asking questions with a smile that hides 1,000 worries. Still others do not speak at all, leaving a token or a note in exchange for whatever is left behind. The market has its own rules, and everyone learns quickly how to move within them. You see the power of these small exchanges. A mother returns home clutching a new recipe, a charm tied tight in her pocket. A young man carries a slip of advice pressed flat in his wallet, reading it again and again as he walks the winding lane. These bits of knowledge, half believed and wholly hoped for, travel quietly through the village, becoming part of the day's work, the night's comfort, the slow changing of seasons. As the sun rises higher, you leave the square and walk back along the familiar path, feeling the hum of all the secrets exchanged. You sense the risk each person takes, the hope that their coin has bought not just advice but a little protection, a little peace. The world outside is filled with rules, but here in the market, you see how quickly those rules can bend in the face of longing, how easily the lines blur between what is forbidden and what is needed. You return to the hush of home, carrying with you the memory of voices, the press of a folded slip in your palm, the knowledge that for every rule there is a counter-rule, for every secret a seller, for every fear an answer, if only for a little while. You find yourself walking the old footpaths after the market has emptied, where the echoes of trades and whispers fade into the gentle hush of fields and hedgerows. Here, in the space between houses and woods, the knowledge once bought and sold begins to blur into something softer, something carried in habit and story. The air is thick with the memory of words spoken in kitchens, fields, doorways, long after the ink of any manual has faded from the page. You sense how advice, first whispered from a scribe or traded in the market, takes on a new life once it slips into daily use. A charm stitched into a sleeve becomes just another part of a dress. An herb hung by the window is left for luck, long after anyone remembers exactly what it was meant to ward off. You see women tracing signs in flour before kneading bread, or muttering an old rhyme as they tie the laces of a child's shoe. Men pause before stepping across a threshold, touching wood and murmuring words learned at a grandfather's knee. Each act is small, half-conscious, a gesture of protection, a habit of hope. You follow these traces from house to house, from garden to barn, noticing how the knowledge handed down as rules or warnings becomes something woven into the rhythm of days. Someone lights a candle before an open window and lets the smoke drift out, saying it will carry bad luck away. Another sets 3 bowls of water in the corner at the first sound of thunder. These customs are not questioned, only repeated, their meaning shifting with the needs of the moment. You hear proverbs traded at the well, old sayings passed from mouth to mouth, their sharpness worn smooth by years of use. A quiet bed, a quiet heart. Luck follows the careful hand. Count your stars before you sleep. You sense how these phrases become a kind of second skin, guiding, warning, soothing, all without ever naming the fear or longing at their center. You see how the old manuals, once precious and rare, leave their mark in small, ordinary things. The way bread is shared at a table, the way a quarrel is ended with a bowl of broth, the way silence itself is treated as a gift. You notice how easily new habits blend with old, each generation making its own peace with the mysteries it inherits. Some things are forgotten, some transformed, but nothing is ever truly lost. You pause in the fading light as a group of children gather by a gate, reciting a skipping rhyme that carries the echo of older warnings, a warning to step lightly, to watch for changes in the wind, to end each day with a word of thanks. Their laughter blurs the sharp edge of the rules. You feel the warmth of memory in the air, the way comfort and caution weave together until they are impossible to tell apart. As dusk settles, you sense the hush deepen, the world growing soft and private again. In each house, small gestures persist: a hand on a windowsill, a charm tucked beneath a pillow, a line of salt scattered at the threshold. These are not rules anyone would write down. They are simply what is done, part of the order of things, a quiet reassurance that the world's unknowns can be met with something familiar, even if only for a moment. You rest, feeling the slow comfort of belonging to a chain of memory that stretches further than you can see. The manuals and their lessons live on, not as pages in a book, but as gestures, customs and words that linger, softened by time, ready to shelter the next person who wonders, hopes or fears in the quiet hours before dawn. You return home as darkness gathers, the path behind you disappearing into the folds of night. The day's business is done. Market secrets have faded into memory, and even the old advice spoken, traded, handed down, has settled quieter now, woven into the hush of your own rooms. The world feels smaller in this hour, the boundaries of home drawn close and gentle around you. You move through familiar spaces, each one touched by the traces of lessons learned, rules followed, rituals repeated. There is no ceremony for endings. Things fade naturally, absorbed into the rhythm of sleep and waking, of waiting and remembering. You see how everything that was spoken, and much that was only guessed, has left a mark faint but enduring, as if each quiet act of care or caution was stitched into the walls. You notice, as you wash your hands at the basin, how old advice lingers in muscle memory. You draw the curtains not just for privacy but for luck. You smooth the blanket on the bed with an extra fold, a habit from long ago. There is a comfort in these things, a reassurance that order can be shaped from uncertainty. The hush is deep, but inside it, you sense a quiet strength. In the stillness, you remember all the boundaries kept and crossed, all the questions left unanswered, all the small acts of hope that have filled the days. You know that not every lesson was written down, not every truth spoken, and that much of what matters survives in gesture, in silence, in the willingness to care even when certainty is impossible. You pause, letting your gaze rest on the small objects that line your shelves: herbs dried and bundled, a bit of ribbon, a folded slip of paper. Each carries the memory of someone else's worry, someone else's hope. You think of the lives that touched these things before yours, and how their presence lingers, even as faces and names fade away. You settle beneath the covers, letting the soft heaviness of the day fall away. In the hush before sleep, you recall how even centuries ago, people searched for guidance, comfort, and answers. One old manual, the Tacuinum Sanitatis, a 14th century health guide, originally from Arabic medical tradition, offered lists of foods, baths, and daily practices not just for health, but keep the body and spirit in balance. Blending wisdom from East and West, these lessons were copied and adapted, echoing through generations, reshaping as they moved from court to cottage, scribe to kitchen table. You realize, as you close your eyes, that the courage to ask, even quietly, even with fear, matters as much as any answer found. All that was unwritten lives on in the way hands move at dusk, in the hush before a question is asked, in the simple kindness of listening, in the hope that tomorrow, the longing and uncertainty will be met with gentle understanding. The old books grow brittle and the ink fades, but their heart wonder, caution, and the desire to know endures, humming beneath the habits of every new day. You let yourself drift, trusting that in silence, in care, in the quiet bravery of asking, something of what was needed will always survive. The hush deepens as the world outside dissolves into gentle shadow, and you feel your body soften against the quiet. The pulse of questions and worries slows, and all the rules and rituals of the day settle into the folds of the night. Each breath grows longer, each thought more distant, and you sense the boundaries of time grow softer, letting you drift far from the noise and need of the waking world. The stories and secrets that circled in the firelight are only echoes now, faint and kind, no longer sharp or urgent. You let the memory of all that old advice drift further away, replaced by a feeling of calm that seeps into every limb. The weight of expectation, the lines drawn and redrawn, the questions left unspoken, these all begin to fade, gentle as mist. Your room grows warmer, safer, filled with the quiet strength that comes from all the generations who sat where you are now, hoping for peace, wishing for answers, finding comfort in the smallest acts of care. Sleep grows nearer. You feel yourself carried on a tide of old wisdom and kindness, wrapped in the soft certainty that the night will hold you, and the morning will bring another chance to wonder and hope. Let your thoughts grow slow and loose. Let your heart settle, and trust that all the longing and quiet courage that brought you here is enough. You are safe. You are enough. The hush is complete. Good night, friend. Sweet dreams.